This is our example app, and as you can see, we get a user component and a user service, and both are connected because we inject the user service in the user component. Now let's say we have a reverse pipe, which reverses any string. That pipe can be tested isolated. We do have this Angular 2 package or these Angular 2 utilities you saw, testbed, async, tick, and so on. There are a couple of utilities in this package, and actually you already saw most of them. The others can be seen in the reference I'll link in the next lecture. But anyways, a pipe can be tested totally independent of Angular 2. Why? Because how does a pipe work? It has this transform function where you pass a string in and get a string out. No need to involve Angular 2 for such a basic pipe. You might have other tasks in your application where the same is true. If you get a service and in the service you get a method which only transforms some data or let's say doubles a number, well then you can test it isolated. You don't need the Angular 2 testing package for that. You can write a normal unit test. And this is what I'll show you at the example of a reverse pipe now. I will create the pipe in the shared folder and I'll create it manually. I'll name it reverse.pipe.ts. And in there, we of course export a class, which is named reverse pipe. And on this class, we attach the pipe decorator, as you learned it, to be imported from @Angular core. And there I pass an object where I give it a name of reverse. Well, and inside of this class, I therefore need to have the transform function. And this transform function expects to get a string, or the value, let's say, which is a string, and possibly some params, though I won't pass some here. Well, and then I can simply return the value, split it by, well, nothing, so that each character is separated. So split it by each character, basically. Call reverse on that. That's a normal function available on an array, and a string is just an array of characters. And then join them again with nothing in between joining them, so that each character is attached to the character before it without a white space in between or something like that. That is what my reverse pipe does. Well, and now for testing this, I can really write my own reverse pipe spec.ts file. Now, if we have a look at the user component spec file, how does a spec file look like? Well, if I copy it, which is a bit overkill, whoops, not here, here, I of course want to get rid of all the it statements except for one maybe, get rid of all these imports, and I can also get rid of the Angular 2 testing utilities because I don't need them. I also don't need the before each. There is no setup to be run before each pipe. All I want to do here, for example, is I want to create my reverse pipe, which is a new reverse pipe, and that is why it's called isolated. It doesn't depend on any other piece in my Angular 2 application. It doesn't even depend on Angular 2. And all I want to do is I want to expect reverse pipe transform if I pass, let's say, hello in there to equal, well, and then this should be OLLEH. That is all. And if I save this, we should now have 11 successful tests because this clearly should succeed. And we do see 11 successful tests indeed after rerunning ng-test, or if you still had it running after saving. This is an isolated test. Of course, you could have some pipe which depends on Angular 2 or something like that. And it really comes down to this question. Does the thing you want to test depend on Angular 2 or other pieces of your Angular 2 application? If yes, well then you get these testing utilities like testbed, which allows you to create components, access the injector, set up the module for testing, and so on. You got async, fake async, and tick to, well, handle asynchronous tasks, and so on. In the lecture at the end of this module, you will learn more about other resources, about other tests you could write, other things you can test. If you don't have that, if you don't have a dependency on Angular 2 or other pieces in the app, well then an isolated test like this might be all you need. And with that, we had a good introduction to how testing here works, how we can use the Angular 2 testing package, the features it offers us to write our tests, to use services. And as I already said at the beginning, I could continue for a couple of hours here, but this is not what this course is about and not what I want to make this course about. It is a good introduction. With that, you should be able to dive really deeper into it with the article in the next lecture. You should be able to use your general unit testing knowledge you already have to take advantage of these tools Angular 2 offers you to create components, to access them, and so on. And with that, that is all I can do. I can encourage you, dive deeper into it, and I hope this introduction was at least helpful to understand how you might decide when to test the connection of Angular 2 and your component or whatever, and when to test it isolated, why unit tests are helpful in the first place, how to get started with the testing utilities Angular 2 gives you, and how to create these example tests we created here. See you in the other modules. Bye. Throughout this course, you learn a lot about Angular, of course, the framework, how to build amazing apps with it, and the many features it includes. Now, what's also part of Angular, and you therefore could also call Angular a platform and not just a framework, is the CLI and the entire infrastructure it gives you around your projects and around your code. Because the code, of course, is the heart. The framework allows us to build amazing web applications. But with the CLI and the project which is configured, and a lot of useful tools around the CLI and around your projects, you actually also can have a very easy and great time building, publishing, deploying, and managing your Angular projects. And that's exactly what we'll have a closer look at in this module. In detail, we'll have a look at Angular projects and the different configuration files again, so that we understand what we really can do there and what their role is. You will see how you can create and manage projects and many things inside of these projects. We'll take a look at something which is called schematics and builders, which is a set of pretty cool features which is included in Angular projects and the Angular CLI, and which is worth knowing about. We'll have a look at projects, apps, and also how to build libraries, because thus far in this course, of course, you learned how to build web applications with Angular. Now, what if you wanted to build a library that can be used in multiple projects? That's also something we'll have a look at. And we'll also have a look at a couple of other things, for example, at deployment, browser support, and much more. So let's dive in. And to dive in, let's create a new project. Now for that, make sure you're using the latest version of the CLI with npm install -g @angular CLI at latest. On Mac and Linux, you might need to add a sudo in front of this. On Windows, you don't. Now, once you got that installed, once you got that latest version installed, let's create a brand new project. And you know how that works with ng-new. Now, actually, before we create such a project, let's hit enter here without entering any name. Now, what you'll see is that if you do that, you actually also are prompted for a project name. So you can also use the command in this shorter way. Now, let me skip this or cancel this with Ctrl-C for now and type ng-new --help. The --help flag can be used after any command to learn more about the command and the different configuration options you have available. So in this case, if I hit enter, you see there are a bunch of flags we could add after the command. So we could type ng-new, some name of our choice, and then for example --collection or --commit. And here you see a description of what these configuration flags do. Now, these flags change over time, new options are added, some options are deprecated, so going through all of them doesn't make a lot of sense here, but there are some which I want to draw your attention to. This here, for example, will become important later, create application. It's set to true by default, so you only need to add it if you want to disable this. And right now this doesn't make much sense to us, but we'll later see why this command can become very important and useful. It can become important if you want to manage multiple applications and libraries inside of one Angular CLI managed project. Again, more on that later.
Dry run can also be interesting if you just want to see what the CLI would do with your command, with the ng-new command here, without actually creating the content on the disk. This might sound like it doesn't make much sense, but if you're passing multiple configuration flags, adding --dry run will spit out what the CLI will do thereafter so that you can verify whether you will get the project you want without actually going through the full setup process and writing everything to the disk, which can be nice at times. With inline style and inline template, you can set up whether new components you're going to generate will actually start with inline styles or inline templates or with external files. This can save you the hassle of setting this for every newly generated component individually. The prefix command allows you to configure the default prefix every new component you generate with the ngGenerate command will have. Now, let me also note at this point that many or most of these options actually can be changed in the existing project later too. And I will show you where to change them and where to generally adjust the configuration in a separate lecture, of course. Routing allows you to specify whether you want to start with a routing module and some initial routes. Skip tests allows you to define whether newly generated components and services and so on will have testing files next to them. Skip install allows you to create a new project with the files written to the disk without the npm dependencies being installed. This speeds up the creation process, and you can then always install the dependencies manually later. So these are some interesting options here, and ng-new --help allows you to go through them in detail. In addition, also check out the official documentation, and that is true for all the things I will be showing throughout this module. I will also reference the official docs from time to time. There you find the latest up-to-date information about Angular, the CLI, the different configuration files it uses. And for example, here for the CLI, you find a list of all the commands it supports, the aliases, so the shortcuts you could use. And of course, then if you click on a command, you find detailed information about this command, what it does, and which options you can set there. You see a bit more information about the different configuration options here. So definitely also check out these pages here if you want to learn more about the CLI in general or the individual commands. With that, let's create a new project here. So here I'm going to write ng-new angular config and simply hit enter without any additional flags. Now then here I get asked whether I want to add routing, and I'll choose N for no here, and I'll choose CSS as my, style sheet format so that I don't want to use Sass or SCSS here, which you could do though. You can choose that, and then you can write your styles with a style preprocessor like Sass. Now, since I didn't choose try run or skip install, this creates the full project, installs all dependencies, and writes everything to the disk. And I'll be back in a new lecture once this is finished.